Welcome to our Bright Talk webinar, one in a series including topics such as making the case for cloud or top tips for deploying Azure networking. Do take a look to see which of the topics takes your interest on our Bright Talk channel. We have all seen that companies everywhere are embracing the cloud services to drive competitive advantages through increasing agility, collaboration, or even decreasing costs. The cloud has the potential to create valuable new business models and revenue streams, along with faster times to market. However, we've also seen it's not as straightforward to adopt, from making sure that you have the right strategy, understanding what can fit in the cloud, to understanding how you manage it and how you realise the benefit which you promise the business in your business case. At BT, we're supporting customers on their cloud journey, where we're leveraging the depth of our capability coupled to our partners to approach cloud transformation across infrastructure, data and network. Network being important, as 60% of all cloud migrations fail due to lack of consideration of the network. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by one of the respected collaborators within the cloud industry. Let me introduce Alex Hilton, CEO of the Cloud Industry Forum, whose experience and views are greatly appreciated. Hi, Alex. Can you give us a quick overview of the Cloud Industry Forum, what role it plays with the industries and beyond?
Yeah, hi, David. Delighted to. Thanks for having me here. Lovely to be here in BT Mansions. So from our perspective, I'm the CEO of the Cloud Industry Forum. We are an IT trade body. We've been in existence for 10 years now, and as the name Cloud Industry Forum implies, our remit is to really talk about all things cloud. The important perspective we try and take on this, though, is we sort of sit in the middle of the IT community. In other words, we have our vendor community, respected organisations such as BT, and indeed some of your competitors and other vendors out in the marketplace, and then a customer base as well. So we try and sit in this kind of vendor agnostic independent world where we don't pass judgment on one technology or indeed one vendor or any type of perspective like that, but we do look broadly at what's happening in the market. The way that we deliver that is primarily through research. So we're not really an analyst firm, but we do look at try and predict what we see happening in the market, the changes, the dynamics and so on. And over the course of 10 years, as you'll appreciate, the cloud market has moved somewhat over that time. So it's a really interesting dynamic journey that we're on right now, and we try and work with customers and with vendors to try and represent what's happening in the industry.
Brilliant. I think it's a really important role, actually, because that education from both a customer, a vendor and a vendor perspective, and bringing that back for everybody so you can take a perspective is really important. So actually, this time of year again, your annual research has hit the road. And I see this year that we're sponsoring some of it, Alex, so in association with you guys. So how's it been received?
Really well. So you're absolutely right, David. So every year now for 10 years, we've been conducting this research. It's a big deliverable for us, big expense for us as an organisation. And we go out to organisations across the whole of the UK to try and really understand and better understand what business users are doing in that marketplace. From a BT perspective, you wonderful people, delighted that you do this, back up and support us as looking at the enterprise marketplace. So your kind of customer base that you tend to work with. The research is really well received. I think it's pretty well acknowledged now in the industry, the fact that we've been delivering this report for 10 years. Many organisations look out for it proactively. We push it out, of course, through all the media outlets as well. And indeed, our membership community, such as BT, really get behind it and utilise it for a conversation thread that you can have with your clients, because it's great at opening doors and having conversations that move away with respect from pure sales conversations into a more holistic, what do we see happening in the market type of conversation, which is important to have with clients, certainly in our digital transformation world. And I think also just, customers now look at that and go, well, we can start to make not necessarily business decisions, but just sanitize and ratify that they're on the right journey based on research findings across an industry.
Absolutely, and I think the learning that comes from it is really, really, really important. And actually, even so, more importantly, we're seeing organisations on their sort of second or third cloud strategy, so they're looking for this type of research to really kind of ratify and help inform where they should be taking their next strategy to improve it. So this year, what are the key trends that are coming out then?
Yeah, so this year we've called the report The Future of the IT Department. So the idea here is that we're looking at, where we see an IT function existing, not necessarily at a departmental level, but could be more broader. Again, looking holistically across organisations of all shapes and sizes. So bearing in mind, obviously, you're focused on the enterprise sector, but our research does also look at vertical markets within that, some of which, of course, will appear in enterprise, certainly financial services, manufacturing, retail, as well as public sector. But as far as this conversation is concerned, focusing more as your audience and the people that you work with are concerned at the enterprise level, we look at, for example, digital transformation, very big theme, very big topic, and as we've discussed before, arguably there's some hype around it. Our blessed marketeers have got hold of it to a degree, and that can cause confusion and uncertainty in the market because I think there is real substance to digital transformation. Now, also in so much as, again, in our research, 35% of organisations in enterprise are on a digital transformation journey. In other words, they have a plan, something tangible that they can physically put their hands on as a digital transformation plan. There are some 50+% who are still developing it, so it's still in play. Now, I think that's still a fairly small number, 35% actually. There's still a lot that needs to be done there, as far as organisations are concerned. Just over a third of organisations in enterprise are on that journey. What's really important, I think, also, though, is that 90% of organisations now have an IT function that reports at a board level. And that's really important because I think, if we go back 10 years ago on the research we were looking at, it was almost the other way around. About 70% of IT functions were not reporting at a board level. And I think it's really important that change is now recognised because that's the sponsorship route for digital transformation journeys.
Absolutely. And the problem that we were having with transformation is bigger than just a technology, is actually about changing the culture and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
It's not just about changing just bits of technology. So actually having that ability to affect process change, culture change, and also sometimes change in budget, in terms of needed is really important. So if we look at why organisations are implementing cloud projects as part of that digital transformation, what are the key reasons you're seeing why, and what are the benefits they're looking to attract?
Right. So as far as organisations on their cloud journey, so firstly, a very binary, simple question we ask is, are you using cloud services? Now, not surprisingly, 93% of organisations are using the cloud. And it is often perceived as the cloud, some mythical place that organisations might go to. Clearly, it's much more complex and in-depth than that as far as cloud services are concerned. What we tend to talk about and focus on is agility, flexibility, and scalability. So those are kind of the three big principles and things that organisations are looking at. Now, that sounds a bit hollow to a degree, but actually those are the things that are really driving customer changes. And as we talked before about a highly competitive landscape, organisations are being disrupted by competitors coming into the marketplace who are utilising technology to move at a fast pace, be agile in the market. So many established big enterprise organisations, regardless of vertical sector, have got to be able to adapt to that. And the way to compete is actually to become agile themselves, which many are becoming. So great that some are going on that digital transformation journey, and whatever the definition around that may be, but there's still a long way to go. Now, from our perspective as a Cloud Industry Forum, of course, what we're looking at is the cloud utilisation. So what I would describe here is cloud is the basis for everything. Okay, that's the platform on which every organisation can then build and create that transformative journey utilising technology that will really help them become more agile as a business.
And in terms of the types of cloud that you're seeing organisations, I think the stats that you've quoted in the research that says nearly a third are still using private cloud or sat on premise in terms of workloads, and we're seeing things like regulation, concentration of data, performance, or even a cultural trend of I can see it, I can feel it, it's in my data center, I have control over it, and therefore that helps me minimize risks. I mean, do you see private cloud remaining here for the future, or what's your view? Because it still is a cloud at the end of the day. Yeah,
it's a really interesting question, I think, David. I mean, I think firstly, if I could just step back on one of the first statements you made there. So firstly, what are organisations using cloud services for? And certainly, as far as public cloud is concerned, infrastructure management seems to be a big part of that. That's a big driver. That said, when we look at IT budgets, and we ask this question in the research, when we look at IT budgets, in excess of 40% of IT budget is still spent on managing infrastructure. Okay.
40%.
In excess of, I think it's 41% precisely.
Wow.
So a large amount of budget, the single biggest, portion, pie, if you like, of that budget is still spent on keeping the lights on, as we've historically come to define it. Okay. So that's quite insightful, I think, as well. Now, more organizations are moving their infrastructure into a cloud environment, but it's still a very, very big spend, which then also limits to a degree the amount of money that can be spent on looking at new projects and new technology around that. And that is like kind of the second layer of where the IT budget is landing. So infrastructure management, one, looking at new projects and everything associated with that falls in at number two, and then networking actually is the third one behind that. So those are the top three spends in terms of utilising budget and spend as far as cloud is concerned. To your specific question, in terms of the balance between public cloud, private cloud, and let's call it on-premise or legacy to a degree, is often the language that gets used. There is a pretty even mix in the research, almost directly in thirds actually, between each of those three buckets, as to where enterprise businesses are putting their technology usage at the moment. I think from our perspective, it just backs up the whole hybrid story. Okay, this is a language terms that people have been using for some years now. We then get into the realm of multi-cloud. There's so many buzzwords we seem to have in this industry, isn't there? And it's a tricky one, in terms of getting the balance right around this stuff. My honest perspective on this, from speaking with clients, from speaking with our members and vendors and so on out there, is that every business is different. Every organisation has its own perspective. Every organisation has its own demands, budgetary cycles, demands on it, speed, seasonality, whatever it might be within that organisation. And you have to do, as a business, what is right for you as a business, right? And that's where, clearly the likes of BT come into play as a trusted advisor, going, your customers, you understand the depth of that, and you can adapt your story and your solutions based on what the business's actual needs are, rather than just going, there's one size fits all, because it doesn't work like that.
I totally agree. And for me, one of the things that we've landed really well by talking to our customers, and actually our customers told us, is we want choice. We want to be able to match the most appropriate workload with the most appropriate infrastructure, and public cloud, private cloud, or even, a legacy environment. That's all about choice and making sure you've got that right choice. One of the things we're also seeing, whilst dealing with legacy, I talked about when we were talking about the board transformation, is the people and the processes. We're seeing cloud actually pull on different skills, and to be successful in cloud, hybrid cloud particularly, you've got to pull together the different towers of network, security, IT cloud, and traditional applications. How in the research is it coming out around the skills and how that is affecting how IT play those skills and retain those skills?
So in our research, there are three sort of headline problems or barriers to cloud-based adoption, transformation journeys, whatever you want to define it as. And the top one of those is skills, IT skills, digital skills that kind of formulate in that space. It's a tricky one for organisations because there's a desire to move at a certain pace, which isn't necessarily matched by the skills and that exist within the organisation. The second one of those three, incidentally, is actually IT budget, lack of budget. And the third one is actually having trusted partnerships, trusted organisations who businesses can work with, okay? We can come back to any of those as you wish, but firstly, the first initial point that you talked about there is the skills piece of it. I honestly believe in this world that we're now in, that the IT professional, to speak fairly broadly in there, now becomes a really important catalyst in the business. Somebody who sits between the IT department and that business function and is able to turn the business problem into some kind of technology fit, or indeed the other way around. Taking, okay, well, we've got a technology challenge here. How do we address that, from a business perspective? And I think that is the changing role of the IT professional in today's business as we kind of look forward around that, especially as we now understand that there's more and more board sponsorship, so it's coming down into the IT department rather than just going up. As well.
I agree. I think we're seeing engagement of some of our clear stakeholders and the people we normally talk to, whereas before we'd have a very technological conversation. Actually we've started to have a very business-based conversation, and also that also gets driven by a number of the applications. So when organisations are looking to try and leverage some of their application innovation in the cloud, like AI, machine learning, all the stuff that the public cloud providers are spending, billions on, actually that starts to have a really a business conversation. Are you seeing that come through at all?
Yeah, very much. So the language that is now being used from the hyperscale providers through to some of our smaller organisational members who are maybe more niche and focused in their marketplace, it absolutely leads with a business conversation. Because that's the language that most organisations talk. We can get into the bits and bytes further down the line. Don't get me wrong, there is clearly still a big technology discussion, as you well know, that has to happen, where you need that trusted partnership. But when we talk about remember the three things on the list in there, the third one was that trusted partnership organisation. What do and we talk about this in the BT report with the Cloud Industry Forum as well. The last page of it, no doubt you've read thoroughly, is that it talks about what do you look for in your provider. It's being a trusted organisation. Are you a scalable organisation? Are you a big enough organisation that you have financial credibility, etc. in the market? All those things that you take as given, but actually, do I trust you as an organisation?
And actually, we're seeing people using partners a lot differently. Whereas before, you'd kind of have these big ITOs where it's do or die, a massive marriage, and from a partner perspective, you then look at how you've invested heavily in that marriage, and then how do you get that return over time. Actually, we're seeing now is what I call smart partnering, much more dynamic. We have projects where we have complex apps that we need these skills. Who do we partner with? Who's best, to help us with that business problem? So we're seeing definitely a lot more dynamic partnering in the cloud, which I think is brilliant.
There's a couple. I agree with that entirely. There's a couple of things I would add in there, which we found interesting in the research. Is one, when we look at and this is back to your point around, maybe more private cloud type of environments. So one of the questions that we asked is, because this is talked about a lot, certainly by the hyperscalers, is going serverless, having a complete, cloud-based, having no physical servers on-prem at all, and that. There's only 2% of organisations who claim they're doing that at the moment in the enterprise, and those are the smaller enterprise organisations. If actually I look holistically at our research, what you'll find is the mid-market section of businesses, the sort of 500 to 1,000 type of employees, size of employees, they're the fastest cloud accelerators in the market. Arguably, you could say, well, they've got a respectable budget that's appropriate in that marketplace, but they're also smaller organisations and therefore able to move quite quickly. And the challenge for bigger enterprise organisations is to get themselves to that point where they are able to move and have the appropriate, project environments that can move and react quickly as well.
Yeah, and they don't have to retrofit. So actually they can think about the art of the possible and how they can embrace best practice and technology investment, rather than thinking, oh heck, how do I make that work with what I've got? And in 40% of the budget is going on infrastructure, keeping the lights on.
Well, to add to that, if I may, the whole legacy conversation that's been going around for a long, long time, I guess by definition, because legacy has a negative connotation, which I think is a bit unfair in some cases, actually. I think what organisations have got is an investment that's been made in some technology. It might be mainframes, whatever the technology may be, that's been working. Okay, so and I think actually to go into organisations and say, right, time to switch that off and get into the cloud is a bit of a daft conversation to have, because there's an investment in there. There's a significant capex that's often been made, and it's like, well, it works. Why? No organisation in their right mind is going to make that change when something maybe hasn't even depreciated fully. So it's picking the right time. Back to the conversation earlier that. Now is the time to move. So legacy can be good, can be bad. It can be the time and opportunity to move, but it can also be, this is functioning and working, so why would I make that change at the moment?
Absolutely, and if you look at it, you've made the investment, you've got the people processes around it. While it's working and it's still fit for purpose and delivering what your business wants, you're not going to change it. Interestingly, though, we see different approaches from different verticals. And so I'm curious to see from yourself any trends or anything you're seeing and the differences from the different vertical players, because things like the other day I was reading about concentration risk for data within the finance industry. Has any of that come out?
So financial services often stands out in this space. So firstly, you remember the infrastructure spend that I was talking about earlier, the 41% or so of IT budget still spent on infrastructure. Financial services is actually slightly larger than that. Okay, so that was, we had one of the bands we had in the research was 40 to 60%. And that's the largest piece as far as so infrastructure spend in financial services actually exceeds the average.
Yeah. But that'd be driven by things like regulation, security.
Absolutely.
Because you'd have security in with that infrastructure. So is there any other trends coming out from some of the other verticals?
So for example, in the retail sector, we're seeing a faster certain desire to look at artificial intelligence, AI. That's quite an interesting one, because I think what we're seeing there's obviously a lot of data. AI is a conversation thread, okay, is being hyped quite a lot in the industry. And I have various definitions around this one. Some of this probably aren't appropriate for this broadcast, but the essence around it is
go on.
It's being talked about a lot, but I'm not sure many organisations are actually doing it at the moment. Okay, there are definite use cases for it, and I absolutely believe it is a trajectory that organisations, businesses will be on, if they're not yet. And many organisations are looking at it at the project level, if not any live implementation at this point. AI is appropriate where you have any big data scenario, okay?
Yeah.
Because that's where it works, okay? Any large data analysis, data lake scenario, that's where AI comes into play. And if you're a retailer, for example, I think looking at, predicting outcomes where you have seasonality of business, where you have stock lines that you have to, make sure you've got at the appropriate levels and so forth, where you might have certain geographies that vary, AI can work really, really well, I think, in that space. The other vertical sector I guess I would pull out in here is the public sector, which historically has always been perceived anyway as a bit of a laggard. As far as technology adoption is concerned. They are one of the fastest accelerating cloud adopters as a marketplace that we see based on the research, which is really interesting. Now, clearly some of that might be politically or government driven from a civil service perspective in terms of taking this cloud-first approach, because that's the way to potentially obtain budgets within the marketplace going down that route. But that is certainly starting to happen more and more. Well,
it makes sense to driving, the innovation. We talked about, efficiency, innovation, agility. So in terms of having to drive change, it probably kind of makes sense. Absolutely. So if I was to look at then the research as a whole, what would be the three key things that would stand out that you would want somebody to take away that would be, you kind of have a kit back when you watch these type of things, you have a kit back that you go, oh, I like that, I'm going to remember that. Yeah. What would be the three things that you urge people to remember that would be useful for them?
Okay, so it's a really good question. My takeaways, I guess, would be, when we talk about digital transformation, I think it will be many digital transformation projects fail. Firstly, that does happen.
Yeah,
okay.
I was surprised at the percentage, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely does happen. It's not just our research. There's other independent research that's been seen out in the marketplace that shows many fail. We have this fail fast type of scenario that exists, and that's okay. But actually, the reality is nobody likes failure, do they? You're putting some budget into something, you want to see it succeed. So number one for me would be having what I describe as inclusivity of digital transformation. Okay, so what I mean by that is it starts at the board level, but it cannot just be dictated to. It's got to be something that has to involve numerous compartments of a business in there. Okay, something that you're taking the whole business on this particular journey. It's not just driven by IT. IT is a functionality around it. One of the things we talked a little bit about earlier was skills and challenges around that one. In some cases, not many yet, but in some cases, we're starting to see a decentralized IT function. In other words, it's becoming more federated across the business, where IT might live in certain departments,
Right.
focused on a bizarre, a particular requirement for a line of business, for example, things like that. So I think that I describe it as inclusivity of digital transformation. I think it is of vital importance. I think the second one for me would be really understanding and taking advantage of the key benefits that we've talked about that cloud technology brings. This agility, scalability, and flexibility. Okay, those are the three things that the cloud services as a whole will deliver. And how can those be addressed in my organization, whether you use cloud in a public or a private sense, but thinking about what the cloud service piece can deliver. And I think the third one ultimately is this technology exists now. Change is coming. We have to adapt to it. There's been lots of kind of stories around, evolve or die, and move on in the marketplace and so forth. Now, I don't think it's quite as radical as that, but we do see things change rapidly in the market. There are competitors in the marketplace in certain sectors who are moving quickly. Financial services, we see this a lot. I could list off quite a few, these fintech organizations, these fast, dynamic, agile moving organizations who are disrupting the market. Now, the big enterprise organizations in that space are reacting and adapting and moving forward as well at their own pace, which can be quite fast as well. So things are happening. So, it's really understanding that change is coming, managing to work effectively with your partnership community. So change is coming and working with your partner accordingly.
Thank you.
My last takeaway there.
Yeah, actually, I think for me they're good takeouts. Although I think the piece about decentralisation is quite interesting in the business unit, but actually we've seen on the early stages of cloud adoption that we talked with some of our customers where the business unit has gone and driven the cloud agenda when it comes to things like compliance, sharing data, making that work, and then scaling out. Actually, I think there's going to be a halfway house where you're going to get, I think the role of the IT department's going to change slightly. It's all going to be about how they set the foundations for sharing, how they set the things for security, compliance, and the concept of landing zones absolutely works into that with some of the clouds so that you get the principles and the policies set centrally, and then they're embraced and taken forward by perhaps the decentralisation and the empowerment. So it's quite an interesting trend to watch. Perhaps in next year's research we can get to see it. So
I would agree with that.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
Pleasure.
This research white paper bears out what we're hearing from our customers every day. Almost all enterprises have mature digital strategies, and the cloud is an enabler. But organisations are finding challenges in achieving the agility, economics, and the flexibility they seek. Skills and experience are in short supply and even harder to retain. Organisations are managing an increasingly sophisticated mix of their own on-prem data centres together with private space in third-party data centres and a growing use of public cloud. Whilst public cloud is fast growing, private cloud is still the right choice, in my opinion, for some organisations who have different application performance requirements, legacy applications that are unsuited to public clouds, or that they operate in a highly regulated environment and need to control. For this reason, we see a continuing strong demand for private cloud and the associated services. From a BT perspective, the most common challenges we help to overcome are: one, making sure that customers have the right choice of cloud infrastructure to match their different needs, as we talked about earlier. There is a right cloud for every workload. Then, delivering cloud transformation, not just addressing the what, but also how you do the how and how that flows down into your organisation. Ensuring that you then have the right skills and tools to manage a hybrid mix of public and private workloads. Those tools are actually different and they have different processes. Now you have to do that in a secure manner that enables your business to scale without breaking any regulations. And finally, delivering the right cloud experience, designing the best low latency, high performance network to underpin the cloud user experience. If performance isn't in the cloud or it isn't delivering the right experience, then people won't adopt. As the cloud market expands and mature, we know that enterprises are highly motivated to retain choice and control over cloud deployments and their application landscape. We want to put you in control of the cloud and turn your uncertainties into confidence, giving you the benefits no matter what your current IT looks like. Wherever you are in your cloud journey, you have the network, infrastructure, and know-how to help you reap the rewards of cloud. Alex, my sincere thanks for coming in today and sharing your words of wisdom. And I'm sure the research will be really good for a number of people and really good. We'll add a link to the Cloud Industry Forum paper so you can get a copy, and don't hesitate to contact if you want to pick our brains on all things cloud. Get in contact with your BT account team or follow the link on this webinar page. Have a good day, and may your clouds be all silver lined.